What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today we're going to talk about sports card breaks. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that ripping wax breaks, they're all net negative plays. They're all negative expected value. These are not any type of winning formulas to making money or profit. But I've been thinking about breaks a little bit more. I'm putting together another video that I will probably release in the next couple of weeks, so it's a little bit of a teaser for you guys. And that's led me to think about how breaks are designed and what the formats are. And it feels like, to me, there hasn't been that much innovation to how breaks are designed, right? You have the traditional pick your team, random team. I've seen a couple of pick your parallels. I've heard of some serial number things, but by and large, these seem to be pretty stagnant and basic designs, right? And so I'm wondering if there's a different format that better reflects what people really want when they open wax or break cards, and how people view the hobby and what things appeal to people in the hobby. So what does that mean? What is this idea I have? So let's start off with the NFL. Let's talk about football players. Which ones have the most appeal in the hobby? The answer obviously is quarterbacks, and it is a big drop off to wide receivers. And then after that, you have running backs, you have tight ends, you have defense players, and then you have special teams. But it's a huge gap between quarterbacks and every other type of player, right? I don't think there's any debate about that. And so shouldn't we design breaks in such a way that reflects this big emphasis on quarterbacks and lesser emphasis on the other positions? Because that type of break would reflect the different levels of hobby appeal for the different positions, right? And so that's the actual idea. So how would this work? Let's create a new format. How would it work? Step one, we need to create positional groupings, as I mentioned. So, group one, quarterbacks, group two, wide receivers, group three, running backs, group four, tight ends, and then group five is what I'm calling my catch-all: defense, special teams. Sometimes a coach card might even get thrown in there. So that's group five, right? Now the second step, or the second question I have for you, is which ones have the most hobby appeal? So obviously I've ordered them in such a way, but if we think about it, like QBs is well ahead of every other group. I would group wide receivers and running backs in the same level, and then tight ends, and then defense, special teams, coaches are another tier below that, right? So those are pretty obvious things. Now, we now need to divide the positional groups based off of the hobby appeal. So I would say quarterbacks, you probably need divided by 8, whereas wide receivers, running backs, you probably just need to cut them in half. And then tight ends and defense, special teams, you don't need to divide them at all because nobody cares about most of these players, right? And so that leads to the new format that I'm talking about. So the first step is quarterbacks. How do we divide them up? Well, you divide them up by division. So you get 8 distinct quarterback division groups. The next one for wide receivers, you divide them just by 2. Divide them into AFC and NFC, and then you divide that by AFC and NFC for running backs as well. And then for tight ends and defense and special teams, you don't need to divide them all, just take the whole league. And right there are 14 different groups that could be used for a break that's unlike any other type of break that I've seen before. I could be wrong. Please feel free to correct me in the comments if you've seen this in breaks before, but I don't think I've heard of anybody doing a break like this. And I think this type of break and using this type of grouping makes a lot more sense than like random team or whatever, right? Because this, you actually get the positions you want. Again, a big heavy emphasis on quarterbacks as opposed to some of the other positions. And that reflects how the hobby appeals to people, right? And I think this makes a lot more sense. And again, if you don't agree with me, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I know you guys like to do that. That's the NFL version. All right, let's go to the other sports. What do these sports look like? Let's think about baseball. So I think it's fair to say that hitters have much more hobby appeal than position or pitchers, right? And so that's kind of what we do here. You group the outfielders and infielders by their division. Catchers have a lot less appeal because they don't play every game. So you don't need to do it by the division. You do it by the leagues, right? So you get AL and NL only, whereas for outfielders and infielders, you go by each of the 6 divisions in baseball. And then for pitchers slash DHs, and I'm doing it pitchers slash DHs, I'm calling that the Shohei Ohtani rule because he used to do both. And so I don't want it to get too confusing. Shohei is in the last group, right? And he's grouped in with all the pitchers, right? And that's a positional format and how it would work for Major League Baseball. For hockey, it'd be very similar. For the forward spots, you break them up by the divisions. And for defensemen and goalies, which have less hobby appeal, you would just do it by Eastern and Western Conference. So you divide it by 2 instead of divided by 4. The one thing I'll say about the NHL is wingers are sometimes hard to differentiate between which one is left wing versus right wing. So a way to get around that is if the position is listed on the card, go with that. And then if it doesn't, then just from the beginning say, we're going to use left wing and right wing and differentiate based off of what's on NHL.com or something like that. And use that as your book of record so that if there's any dispute, you just go there and you figure it out, right? So that's how the NHL positional grouping would work. And finally, for the NBA, you must be wondering how this works. Great question. I have no idea because what is a guard and what is a forward, they're all commingled into one group. You have players like Luka Doncic, who is the size of a forward but plays like a guard. You could see here, I have Jason Tatum on the screen. That's directly from NBA.com. And his position is literally listed as forward guard or guard forward. So the NBA doesn't know what the positions are. I don't know what the positions are. So I'm not going to try to use this positional methodology to the NBA. But I do think it is possible to do it for the NHL, baseball, and most importantly, football. So I would love to hear your comments as to whether or not you think there's merit to this positional break idea. If you've seen it before and I'm just like regurgitating an idea that I haven't come across, let me know in the comments below. As we sometimes do on the channel when I am prepared, we preview the next one. The next time, we're going to talk about autos. There's been a lot of talk about how not having autos in product is a problem for sports cards because of exclusivity agreements. I'm thinking about, Wemby and some of the quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm telling you, it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all, and I think we're blowing this out of proportion. So that'll be next time. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.